in a deep democracy process, everyone is equal and everyone's view is equal. So it's not, we'll listen to what the manager says because that's most important. And it's not to, they have valid views and really important views, but so does everyone else. So it's about the group will make better decisions when everybody's views are heard and everyone's listened to. People can make contradictory statements because parts of us might believe one thing, parts of us might believe another.
Yeah.
You really embrace to do that as well. So you kind of you get to feel experience what it feels like to wear both sides or different sides of things, not just this is what I believe and that's it. In the world that we live in at the minute, there's none of that nuance. So it's kind of very, I'm on this side. You just come into a decision in a much more democratic, fairer way that really encourages and really looks at the voice of that the ones who say no will kind of go against it. What they bring in is massive and really important. Massive is the wrong word, but really important. And that's the voice that isn't there usually. That we do disregard that.
So I'm absolutely delighted. This is the second episode of the Change Talk podcast, and I'm really delighted today to have my long-term associate and colleague, Paul Connery, with me. Paul, welcome to Change Talk.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to it. Yeah.
Really, 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 really honoured. And we're going to talk today about deep democracy. We'll come on in a moment and explain what that is and unpick it. But first of all, Paul, do you want to just give us a little bit of a potted history of your kind of work life to this point, just so we know where you're coming from?
Yeah. There was never a plan really. I kind of moved through stuff. But yeah, I mean, I used to work a long time ago in frontline services, so homeless services, drug and alcohol services, both paid and voluntary work, and then was a manager of a day centre for homeless people 20 years ago or something, and then worked for Homeless Link for 11 years. So Homeless Link's a membership organisation for frontline homeless agencies in England. So I covered the Northwest for 11 years, which was a real privilege, going around to lots of different projects, working with people that have been homeless, organisations, day centres, hostels, local authorities, lots of other organisations, really looking at culture change and looking at how we can sort of move homeless services at the time. So quite a lot of them were quite institutionalised, so moving them to be more a place where people could really turn their lives around and really change. So there was a lot of money around in those days. Obviously, It's a different world now, but yeah, that was in the last Labour government. There was a lot of funding that went into that, and then after that, supporting organisations and local authorities sort of deal with austerity and trying to protect homeless services. And I was around then at the beginning of sort of the multiple needs sector, I suppose, recognising that people that are homeless are experiencing lots of different things at the same time. So trying to bring those sectors together. I think it's gone through a number of different names. So complex needs, there's many, many of them.
Multiple and compound needs, I think, seems to be. And we've had multiple disadvantage, but we're basically talking about people who have, I guess, overlapping sort of mental health, drug and alcohol, offending, domestic abuse, physical health might be a number of those kind of issues that are coming together often with that kind of long-term homelessness, housing instability. Yeah,
and I think before it was a lot of services would just deal with one issue at a time, but people are not like that, and it's talk about complex needs, but often it's the system that's complex and not the person. So yes, and I've always been passionate about how can we involve people or include people that have had that lived experience in discussions, decisions, how they could shape the services and the sectors, and how we could build systems and services that actually are responsive to them and to their needs as well. So I've always had a thread of that through all that work. And then from 2016, I've been self-employed, so doing lots of things. I worked for Lankelly Chase as an associate for 8-9 years. So they're a funder looking in social justice, looking at power and how that people perhaps who haven't been given power before or haven't been able to influence decision making, how can we bring those decisions into communities really? So doing a lot of work with them. obviously I've worked with yourself for a long time, so we got to know each other through. We both did some work with Crisis
Yeah.
on Housing First, yeah, in a few different areas, and looking at feasibility. So we met at the Liverpool City region, which then went on to
2017?
something like that. Yes, it's a
A
long
while
time.
ago, wasn't it?
Yeah, and then we worked in North Wales together, Lancaster, I think, and we've just done some stuff in Brighton, looking at a multidisciplinary team. So yeah, doing bits of that as well. So just kind of it's seeing what's there and kind of moving and developing. But yeah, and the Lankelly Chase work, I worked as they were developing their northern approach to kind of multiple disadvantage, as it was called then, and specifically worked in York for a couple of years with lots of a range of different people and groups, and then Greater Manchester for about 3 years as well. So, and that only finished for me last year. So yeah, lots of different things over those years. Yeah.
And it's interesting, you know, you reflected earlier on how systems are complicated. And I think Lankelly Chase is an organisation that has always kind of, or for a long time anyway, has really championed the need to think across all those different silos if we're going to work effectively with the most disadvantaged people. I know they produced the hard edges research, didn't they, a number of years ago, might be a decade ago now, that really started to look at how those needs intersect for people. And you know, it's great that they've also really championed that kind of co-production, citizen voice throughout that process. So yeah, I'd be really looking.
Yeah, at the hard edges, yeah, I think it probably was about 10 years ago. And that's when I got involved with them because I think what came out of that is actually a lot of the deprivation in England was in the north, but they're London based and a lot of their staff were London based. So they recognise that actually they need more northern based people. So I knew Alice Evans, who was the deputy chief exec there at the time, and she brought me in to that work, and so I felt really privileged. And it's kind of they were working in maybe 4 or 5 areas at the time, really looking at that challenging power, challenging systems, bringing in voices that perhaps hadn't been included before, that had been. I don't think they're not necessarily marginalised, but the system does marginalise them. So kind of groups and communities that are just not included in anything. They don't have that age. They're not given that agency or offered that agency to make the changes that affect them. So yeah, so that came out of that, and they really were always challenging themselves about where power sits, where decisions are made, and the Greater Manchester work was their attempt really to devolve decision making into local communities. So we held that responsibility for Lankelly Chase in Greater Manchester. So there were 6 of us in Greater Manchester, of how decisions were made locally. So we've helped to build a network of about 40 groups. Some of them had never received funding before. Some of them were established. Some of them just hadn't. So, and it was women and young people led groups, particularly from Black and Brown people leading those groups as well. So it was really reaching out to some parts of Greater Manchester that had just been ignored for a long time. And it was about participatory decision making, and that group now, that network is still going, but it's self-sustaining. It's running on its own, really, which is great.
That's great.
Yeah, and I suppose that's where deep democracy came into it as well.
I was going to say that sounds like cueing deep democracy. So yeah, I mean, do you want to start off by telling us a little bit about what deep democracy is, and then obviously we'll think about a bit of how you came about it and how you used it. So what is it?
Yeah, so it's sometimes difficult to describe and pin down really, but it's originated from there was a Jungian psychologist in America called Arnold Mindell. I think he died last year actually, but so he started to work with groups, and particularly looking at how groups interacted together, how they related together, how they made decisions, and how you can surface kind of what's not in the consciousness of the group. So how you could bring what's in the unconscious of the group into the awareness of the group. So they use the iceberg metaphor quite a lot. So you've got the iceberg and you've got the waterline, and the tip of the iceberg is what's in that group, what everybody knows in the group. And what you're trying to do with deep democracy is lower the waterline so that more information, more from people, more of what's going on in the group is known to everyone. And then from there, the group can make better decisions, I guess, really. Because I mean, we'll talk a little bit more about the difference between maybe a formal meeting and kind of how deep democracy can work. So he developed those processes, and then there was a couple in South Africa called Greg and Myrna Lewis, and they were asked in post-apartheid South Africa to develop a set of processes for, particularly, I think it was the National Telecoms Organization. And obviously, there was a lot of issues and a lot of things that hadn't been said before, particularly around race. And Black people in South Africa weren't able to hold any supervisory or management positions under apartheid. So suddenly, workplaces shifted totally, and all the dynamics shifted. So they wanted a process or a number of processes where people could really air how they were feeling. So talk about, it might be resentment, or it might be anger, or it might be stuff that's been bubbling away but it's been pushed down for so long. So a way for that to come out. And what they did, they changed Mindel's work and made it they put a lot of boundaries around it, made it safer, I think, really. So that these things could come up in a safe place. And then Myrna's carried it on. So she lives in Australia now, but I've done quite a lot of training with Myrna. So Myrna Lewis has developed it, and it's been used so it's the Lewis Deep Democracy method that I got trained in, which is from Myrna Lewis. And it's been used across the world, really, in a way of having different types of conversations, making decisions that are more democratic, saying what needs to be said. So making sure, and it can be used. I mean, I can use it on myself. I've used it as a parenting. I've used it in my relationship. But you can use it in groups. You can use it in organisations. And I know that across the world, they're using it. Like schools have adopted it, hospitals, different workplaces, some corporate places, but some community settings as well. And it's a way as well, and a method to explore tension and conflict. So you kind of lean in it instead of like hiding it or shying away from it. You lean into the conflict and the tension and allow it to emerge, because then the group can go deeper as a group. So
that's brilliant and really powerful for someone like me, who I have to admit I find tension and conflict quite difficult. I see myself as quite a sort of mediator, and I like people to get along. I like to find a kind of common ground. And I'm just recognizing as you're talking that it's easy sometimes to kind of gloss over things, isn't it, actually? And it might sort of feel on the surface like things are going quite smoothly, but actually there's a real risk, isn't there, if we don't kind of unearth that we're not really bringing the group with us. It's
yeah, and I mean, I don't particularly enjoy conflict or tension either, but what it does give you is like kind of like the boundaries around that. It's a safe place to bring that up, because if you think of an organization, like any sort of organization, quite often the decisions are top down, so it's quite hierarchical, and the decisions are made away from the workers quite often, so that it's imposed on them. And within deep democracy, there's something called the resistance line.
Okay.
So it's kind of like if decisions are made away from those people. So say just in this case, in a group of workers, if their team, the decisions are made elsewhere, they're probably going to start to resent it because they have no say in it. And there's sort of a pattern of behavior that you start to see. So people start to kind of make sarcastic jokes, and kind of there's a lot of gossip that goes on, and kind of like, oh, did you see what they said? Or, kind of, then people might, the communication starts to break down. People start to just not do what they're told to do and things like that. And it kind of it goes from being quite covert and sort of these kind of things that are whispered and stuff to quite overt. And it can lead to, if it carries on and it's not addressed, it kind of leads to just a breakdown, really. So it could be one person might leave the organization, they might be made redundant, or something happens that it can't carry on anymore because it's broken down. So deep democracy tries to catch that, if it's happening, and by involving people in decision making at a much earlier way and in a democratic way as well, it means that they feel included and involved, and it's not, that resentment doesn't build. So you build in better teams, really, I suppose, really. If it's an organization, if it's a community, you're just building more understanding of each other and getting to know each other, and you can go deeper then. I mean, I've certainly experienced it that when we've used it in a team as a way for us to make decisions, you just get to know each other a lot better, and you learn as well that the tension or the conflict is where growth can happen. So you kind of lean into it, and the more you do it, the more you realize that's the way. So it's kind of like you're almost looking for it as a way of that everyone can grow together. So, and it doesn't mean it's challenging as well. It doesn't mean it's easy, but it can really shift things. So yeah, it's
That's great. And I can imagine all kinds of, I mean, you've talked a lot about race and different racial groups. I mean, in a previous existence, and we'll be focusing on this in some future Change Talk podcasts. But I used to work sort of thinking about equality and diversity in organizations, and lots of what you're saying there in terms of sort of employee engagement and the kinds of journeys that organizations can go on and how dysfunctional that can become. You end up with kind of cliques, and you end up with unconscious or frankly even conscious bias, and that organizations can really break down in that way, can't they? You end up with a lot of bullying, a lot of passive aggression and resistance, and it sounds like this tool could be really useful for those types of organizations, as well as lots of the kind of co-production type work that we've both been involved in the homelessness and multiple compound needs sector.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And you think of like the organisations like that in multiple compounds needs sectors. Like staff will feel excluded, but the people that are accessing services, they're another level down of exclusion, aren't they? So, and what I've seen actually, it's been used, or we've facilitated it with traditional decision makers, if you like, people higher up in the hierarchy, and maybe frontline staff, or whatever want to use, whatever term we want to use, and people with lived experience. It's quite often the managers that feel most uncomfortable. It's not designed to do that. It's not trying to make them uncomfortable. But I think because it can be quite exposing at times, and it is, I suppose maybe if they're used to having more control, they don't have control, and it is a tool that tries to take out rank. So it does in a deep democracy process. Everyone is equal, and everyone's view is equal. So it's not we'll listen to what the manager says because that's most important, and it's not to they have valid views and really important views, but so does everyone else. So it's about the group will make better decisions when everybody's views are heard and everyone's listened to, and we kind of it's a different approach. But I do find that people higher up in the hierarchy sometimes do feel a bit more uncomfortable initially, but once they see how it works, I think they see the benefit of it.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? As managers, we're sort of almost by default of being a manager forced to wear a particular kind of hat, a particular kind of mask, be in a particular role, and it can sometimes be quite difficult to kind of peel that away and talk about stuff that you might really, really, really be feeling on the inside. It can be particularly exposing, can't it? I think.
Yeah, and there's a lot of theory behind it as well. So a lot of psychological stuff, and there's things around people's roles and role theory, and how in a group somebody might take on the helper, or somebody might take on the leader role, or and sometimes it is whoever's in that job normally, but in deep democracy it could be anybody. So it's kind of like but they're taking on that role not just for them but for the whole group. So it's kind of recognizing actually there's bits of each role in all of us, and someone might be the disruptor in that group, but they're taking on that role for the whole group because the group needs the disruptor. So there's a lot that goes on behind it, a lot of theoretical stuff. But yeah, I think professionally we're taught to kind of not bring our full selves in quite often, and we kind of have a mask almost, it doesn't help build relationships, I think. So I think I think there's a place for that, but I think it can be limiting as well to have to, because you're not getting to the depths, I suppose, really, and people are keeping a lot hidden, so that limits what's available to the whole group.
Absolutely. And of course, part of the reason that people don't bring their whole selves to work is that they don't feel safe doing so, especially if you're in that kind of quite toxic environment. So,
Yeah.
well, I mean, you've mentioned that obviously there's a real structure here for this, and that the structure itself provides kind of safety and a process and can contain some of those kind of concerns. So just walk us through what that process looks like, Paul, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say as well, like you can. There's a formal process. So me as a facilitator, a group or an organisation might ask me to come in as a facilitator and facilitate a session. So you can do that, but you can also bring in the tools informally as well quite often. So it's not that this is the only way to do it. But yeah, there's 5 stages I think along the line. So if I was going to be brought in to say an organisation, a small team, so there might be 12 people. We'd come together and then I'd talk through each bit as we went, so everyone knows what's happening, where what it's about, so everyone's in the same position really. And we always start with a check-in. So just it could just be simple as how are you and how are you arriving today, and it just allows the whole group to know where everyone's at. So it might be that, I mean, I know we're at our home now, but we may have been stuck in traffic this morning, or,
I've had a nightmare with the tech at the
oh,
start.
yes. Oh, yeah, maybe. Yeah, that would never happen, but yeah. So yeah, you would share that with amongst the group, or you're just having a bad day, or you didn't get a coffee, you needed one. So just how that person is then in the space. So you do the check-in, and it's just a chance for everyone to say where they're at, race basically. And I use check-ins in pretty much every meeting I go in now, whether it's deep democracy or not. And I facilitated. I remember when we started the network I talked about before, facilitating a session with about 40 people online, and the check-in lasted about an hour and a half of a 2-hour meeting. So, but it was
Check
a
out.
really well, it was. Yeah, we did. Yeah, we had to do a different type of checker, but it was the first time everyone had met, and it was just a really good way for them to bring themselves in. So we all got to know each other a bit from that. So yeah, but in this process, you would do that. And then you'd go into what's called the soft shoe shuffle, which is a bit of a mouthful. And
Huge shuffle. That is a mouth. Okay.
it's a conversation on your feet. So you're in a space, you'd all get into a circle. You don't need chairs for the rest of it, or for quite a bit of it. And whatever topic you wanted to do. So if the group had to make a decision about something, you'd start with a question about that, or that topic. And what I'd ask someone to make a statement about that. So they say statements that are true to them. So it's from the I believe this, or I think this. Short statements, and then if people agree with that statement, they break up the circle and they go and stand with that person. If
Okay.
they disagree, or they just got a different view they want to make, they go and stand in an unoccupied part of the room, and then I'll come and find them and stand with them, and they'll make that another statement, and then everyone moves again. So you're moving from every statement.
Nice.
And it's just you're exploring the issue you want to work on, or the decision you want to make, just seeing what views are coming up, and it gives everybody a chance to have a say at that point. And it could be as well. We do say you can cheat as well. So if you don't want to say anything, just go and stand with the person who's made a statement, because you're not going to get asked then. If you're in an unoccupied part of the room, you'll get asked to make a statement. So it moves people around, so people start to move, and it's interesting to see physically how they move as well. So kind of you sometimes get to a point where you're just going round in circles, and people come back into a circle, or they kind of all stood around in a little group, and that's an opportunity to see there's something's trying to emerge here. They're kind of going round and round because something needs to come out that's deeper. So when you're facilitating that, you're looking for a polarity. You're looking for two different sides to an argument or a debate to emerge, and that's the next phase, really. So people might be doing that. Might even be just for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, just making different statements. People can make contradictory statements, because parts of us might believe one thing, parts of us might believe another.
Yeah.
And it's really embraced to do that as well. So you get to feel experience what it feels like to wear both sides, or different sides of things, not just this is what I believe and that's it. So when you feel the polarity come in, so two different sides, you name it and say, does that sound right? And see if the group feel that's right or not. And then what you've got is two sides to a debate then. So you move into the next stage, which is the debate. And this is just a chance you stand facing each other, and you say everything that needs to be said from one side of the debate, it's not a back and forth. You just say everything that needs to be said. Then you can go over to the other side, say everything that needs to be said back. And you do that a couple of times. But again, you can really go from one side to another. So when you do it, you embody kind of two, could be opposing views, and you start to see this issue or whatever it is, in a different way. You start to experience it in your body. You start to experience it. You say, oh yeah, I do believe that, but also I believe this. So it's not, I mean, in the world that we live in at the minute, there's none of that nuances. So it's kind of very, I'm on this side. I mean, I'd hesitate to mention Brexit, but that debate was very much you're on one side or the other. There was no real nuance to it. So yeah, you do that, and it just is a really great release as well, because you can say whatever you want to say as long as it's true to you. You can get that out and say it. And then once everything's been said, you sit back down again, and we call it's what hit home. So it's kind of, you all sit there, and it's kind of, what's the one thing out of that debate that was said that really resonates with you. And it might be something that actually you felt in your body. It might be something that hurt. It might be like, actually, that really shocked me, or whatever it is, or just something that turned a light bulb on, or something like that. So you all share that, and it's kind of, that's the wisdom of the group, because everyone's sharing their one thing. So you get that. Usually, you might just get your own take on it, but you're getting everybody. So if it was a group of 10, you get in 10 people's wisdom for the price of one, really. And then you move in, I suppose, to the democratic side, because if you've got to make a decision, you then vote. So you start, somebody puts in, right, I think this is the decision. Someone says, right, this is an idea, this is the decision, and people, you start voting. So somebody might say, yeah, I like that, but what about this? And you vote until there's a majority. So it's refining what the decision is then, but it's a whole group. Nobody has more say than anyone else. It's a group decision based on everything that's been said and the process they've gone through together. What's different as well, like obviously in our democratic system, you have, if it's 51% to 40, I'm going to mention Brexit again, 52 to 48.
Yes.
You go with the 52, and the 48 are completely disregarded. It's like, it doesn't matter what you think or say, you're invalidated now. In deep democracy, if you've got 10 people, if 7 say yes, we want to go with this decision, you do go with that decision because that's the majority. But what you do then, ask the 3 people who voted against it, this is the decision, this is what we're going to go with because it's a majority, but what do you need to come along with that decision?
I see.
And that, you get some amazing wisdom out of that, because you're really looking for we call it the minority of the wisdom of the minority voice. So in that meeting, so 3 people will say, well, I'll go along with it, but only if you include this. So then you get 3 kind of added on bits to this, which gives it a bit of balance and allows the group that's not in the majority to be heard. Like, their views are really valid. And you add it on, and then you vote again. And usually you do get a consensus at that point. So you just come into a decision in a much more democratic, fairer way that really encourages and really like looks at the voice of that the ones who say no will kind of go against it. What they bring in is massive and really important. Massive is the wrong word, but really important. And that's the voice that isn't there usually. That we do disregard that. And then just to end it, you would then check out as well. So just like you mentioned roles before, somebody maybe might have taken on a role in that group that they don't like. Or doesn't feel like them, if they're just making sure they don't leave that, they don't go away with that. So you can just put everything back in the middle and we just leave. So that's a kind of, and that takes about 2 hours to do that process.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So, but you could do little bits of it. I mean, you could do a check-in in your meetings, or you could do, if you feel there's something that there might be worth having a debate on, you can just go straight into that. You can make decisions, and you just ask the group, let's get all the views out, let's hear everybody's view, and let's hear that. So you can do a formal process like that, or you can do it quite casually and informally. So yeah, you do. I mean, we used to, like I said, I was in a team of 6 or 7 of us. That's how we made decisions. And we were looking at quite big some funding decisions at times. And quite a lot of us, we'd never been funders before. And it's a huge responsibility because some people inevitably get funding, some people don't. There's a line somewhere. So we had to really, to have that tool in place and the boundaries around it was really helpful for us to just to know that we'd really checked it out and we'd been rigorous in our decision making and listening to the alternative view as well, and like, oh yeah, I never thought of that, we'll bring that in. And just it just really helped us, and it helped us as a team. And we kind of then and we were doing it all online because it was during COVID. So we quite a few of us had never actually met each other in person.
Wow.
We were making these decisions, and yeah, it helped us to get really deep as a team, and kind of bringing more of yourself in. And sometimes, the check-in questions will be like, if you were a color today, what would it be?
Nice.
That does reveal things. So yeah, it's I really like it. There's lots of different things you can do, but the formal process when you're facilitating it can be a bit. Sometimes you don't know where it's going, and kind of you're trying to keep hold of it, and then somebody might say something that could shock, or it's like, and you as a facilitator, you're trying to stay neutral and bring compassion in and not bring your own stuff in as much as possible, and really, just holding that process together. And it can sometimes you encourage emotion in there, so sometimes it can be quite emotional. And what we're very clear on is if we're having a debate, it's a debate about views. You're not debating. It's not people against people. It's a view against a view. And like I said, you can hold part of one view and part of another. So it's not as rigid. And I think we probably need a lot more of that in the world at the moment, to be honest.
Yeah, no, I'm really struck. I mean, spent a lot of time thinking about ambivalence, and how we, work through ambivalence in my career. And I think it's really interesting, that point that, it's not a two-party system. It's not a binary kind of scenario where we're all on one side and you're all on the other side. We often shift between and occupy multiple positions. I'm just wondering, do people sort of need sometimes a bit of a nudge or a bit of encouragement to kind of break out in that sort of soft shoe shuffle? And if so, what sort of techniques do you use? I think, we're thinking about that organization where there's a lot of stuff left unsaid, a lot of people are in their roles. I can imagine it can be quite difficult to be the first person that goes over to the other side of the room. What's your experience of that, Ben?
I mean, there's certain things, you can bring in. I guess one thing, we do say is kind of like spreading the know, we call it. So there's quite a lot of little phrases and stuff. So say if somebody does, so that's part of the reason in the soft shoe shuffle. If somebody has got another view to make, whoever's facilitating goes and stands next to them. So they don't feel it's them on their own making that statement. That I'm stood with them, and as a facilitator, I'd be neutral in that, but standing alongside them. So that's one way. It could be as well, just you might throw a few things out there just to see what people think, or just you just encourage it. And you could, if it's difficult for people to bring that out, and you could just start something a bit less of a flashpoint, really, just something it might be like, let's do the soft shoe shuffle about what brand of tea we're going to have, or what biscuits you're going to have afterwards, or something.
You have a warm-up topic almost.
Yeah, and that might lead in, because then people do start to occupy roles anyway. And you're right, though, because it can be really difficult if you do have somebody who's quite senior in an organization in a group, and for those people to suddenly start saying things that might be controversial, or because there might be a risk to them, they're like, well, this might be okay here, but what about tomorrow when we're in a different meeting or whatever? Or and I did do a deep democracy process recently, and it was in an art setting, but there was a few teams went round together, and even I didn't know who they were, but I knew exactly who the managers were in all those teams. You could tell where the ranks at, even though we encourage it not to be in the process. It's still there for them as a group. So yeah, it can be difficult, but I think coming back to something that's not going to be too emotional is a good way to do it.
Yeah.
If and just on the other side of that, when we do the debate, if you feel there's going to be quite a bit of emotion, we then call it the argument. So just sort of it's ramped up a little bit, and you put some safety rules in place. So the one safety rule we'd have for deep democracy is that nobody has a monopoly on the truth. So everybody has a little bit. So we really do want alternative views because that view could be really important to add to the whole. So it's not just, one person has, nobody has it. So we all have a little bit. And if we don't hear those other views, we don't get to hear the whole truth. But then ask the group, what would help you to feel safe, and what do you need in place? And sometimes you'll get a few of them. I mean, we can even vote on them as well. Do these feel right for you? And we'll vote through them as well. So sometimes it can be a little bit of a tricky process to move through. It can be, and that's why you kind of keep it flowing and keep it moving, because you don't want it to become too stagnant, because people start to just tune out. And so you want to keep it moving a little bit. But so yeah, it can be tricky, but I found usually there's always somebody who wants to say something.
Yeah.
No,
and that's
you really don't want them to feel like it's just them. So that's why you would say they'd make a statement, and you would say, and does anyone else feel a little bit like that? And then others are going and stand with them. So they're like, oh, okay, yeah, it's not just me then. There is others. So yeah, you're kind of spreading that out, really, spreading the alternative view.
Yeah,
so
that's
they
good.
feel they're holding it all.
A technique I've used in training quite a bit is kind of getting people to stand along a continuum across the room. So you might have a statement and you might say, if you absolutely 100% agree with it, stand here. And if you 100% disagree with it, stand down there. And people will obviously work their way along that continuum. And then we might come along and say, what number are you? And they'll say, oh, I'm a 4. And he'll say, talk me through being a 4, and move along that. Can deep democracy, do you either have to stand with do you have to stand very clearly with one person or another, or can you sort of put yourself somewhere in the middle?
Yeah, you can do, and you're always moving with every statement, so you can move it around, or yeah, because you might feel we say like, do you feel does anyone else feel a little bit like this? So somebody else might say, well, I agree with that, but actually I feel this as well, or so you're just kind of looking for those nuances, and you're almost looking for that. Myrna Lewis calls it like a la 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 lee. So kind of like you're looking for the lee. So you're looking for the one that's pretty much out there, because that's bringing something up from deep within the unconscious of the group, and it's like, and that can really shift things. So you're kind of really looking for that alternate view. So yeah, it's not like you have to agree fully with them. It might be like parts of me agree with that and parts of me don't.
Yeah.
But just what you were saying then, I remember we did Myrna did come to Manchester a number of years ago now. I think it was about 2018 or something, and there was loads of people from across Europe, across the world as well. And we did the resistance line that I talked about before on the floor. So we kind of go, and then as get together with people from your country, and as your country, where are you on this? And kind of, it was again, I keep bringing Brexit, which I shouldn't really, but it was around that time. So we were really like at separation time, with everything had broken down, and it was just a really good way, a physical way of just seeing where everyone was. Like there's a lot of people from the Netherlands, and at that time there was a lot more cooperation, and they felt they were in harmony more with each other and stuff. Yeah, it's just a good way. I think doing things like that you've mentioned, it's a good physically to move really helps to see it and experience it in a different way, as opposed to, you must have signed a lot of meetings. I know I have, where it's a very formal meeting. Everyone's sat around a table. There's an agenda that's agreed by maybe one or two people in that. That some of the decisions have already been made outside of the meeting, but that's not spoken about. And it's a very formal agenda, and it kind of, I've worked with people with lived experience, that's a very hard meeting for them to walk into, because when I worked across the Northwest, I'd be going to lots and lots of homeless forums, lots of different groups like that. I'd always be the outsider coming in, and I didn't like it. It was not a very welcoming one, and quite often feels a bit tokenistic, and obviously not all of them. There were some really good ones too, but and also, it wasn't really many decisions were being made because, like I say, they were already made elsewhere. And then you tend to get people then would send somebody else who's kind of they're the manager of, and then it becomes tokenistic. So yeah, it just that to me is deep democracy is like the antidote to that almost. In kind of really making it more inclusive, more informal, and just bringing up stuff that just wouldn't come up in a meeting like that, really.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. And I mean, I think there's something really important about that physicality of doing that kind of soft shoe shuffle, if you can
hard
say
to say,
it.
yes.
Because I suppose I'm thinking quite often in a facilitated group, the kind of alternative to that is you dish out a load of post-it notes, don't you? And
Yeah.
you have this situation where there's a conversation going on top, but there's an option for people to write something different on the post-it notes. But you don't necessarily always get to kind of really unearth those views, and not everybody feels comfortable or is able to sort of write things down as well as the next person. Where there's something, that kind of cuts across kind of literacy issues and is much more visible to the whole group, isn't there, by doing it in that kind of physical way. But I'm just wondering, how do you do that on Zoom or on Teams or when you're in a virtual space?
Yeah, I mean, it's more difficult. Obviously, you can't physically move around. But yeah, I did because when I initially trained with Myrna, I was training with most people. We were all in Greater Manchester, but she was in Sydney. So we had. So it was the evening for her, but it was in the wind. It was over a winter, and it was like 7 o'clock in the morning meeting. So we're suddenly on Zoom and then going into processes, and it was a lot. But, so you can do it. You lose the physicality, obviously, but I haven't done one on Zoom for a while, so I'm just trying to remember. But yeah, I've done quite a few over the years, and it's just you just have to hold it a bit differently. So obviously you could do a check-in and kind of
Mm.
remember who's checked in. The soft shoe shuffle, it's more you just have to use hands and things
Yeah,
like that. It's a
yeah.
bit like that and put the hands up and but yeah, it does work because
Mm.
I prefer it in a room. Like I prefer meeting in a room anyway. And we've all done enough Zoom and Teams calls, haven't we? But and as amazing as they are, but also yeah, so it does work. But I think there's something about being in the same space. And I think as a facilitator as well, you just for me, like you can sense body language better. You
Mm.
can kind of sense when the group's beginning to kind of go round and round again,
Yeah,
just energetically, really, and where everyone's stored.
yeah,
So yeah, it does work.
yeah.
I've done lots of processes online, but I prefer it. It works better
Yeah,
in person.
yeah. You can really read the room much more,
Yeah,
can't you? Sense those individuals who might be emotionally upset and, provide some support to them, or you can just kind of like gently nudge the people who you think are kind of wanting to break away, but for whatever reason finding that quite difficult, physically going and standing next to somebody. Obviously, you
yeah.
can sort of convey that online, but it's a bit different, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, and I think like I said, you can cheat obviously and hide a bit, but you can. It's easy to see who is trying to do that in person, and online you can actually just almost be invisible a little bit,
Yeah.
can't you?
Well,
So
yeah, people turn cameras off and everything. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean certainly, yeah. And I mean, Myrna obviously has been doing this since the '90s, and she's an incredible person. And I've seen her do a deep democracy process and I've been involved in it with about 200 people.
Wow.
Is a very highly skilled thing to do, and it was quite tense when you've got a debate and you've got like 100 on either side and stuff.
Yeah.
But some really deep stuff can come out of that as well. So yeah, it can be big groups. I know Arnold Mindell when he started it, he was working with he'd be working in like the projects in Los Angeles or something with lots of different communities with hundreds of people as well. So it can be small scale, large scale. But yeah, online, I think doing it with like 200 or something would be
Yeah. Yeah.
not advisable.
Highly skilled. Certainly not something you do as a first foray. I'm just wondering what kind of you've sort of started to touch on this, but I'm just wondering what sorts of changes you've seen within groups by using deep democracy. What kinds of things have come about through the process?
Yeah, I mean, I think it, like I said, it helps the group to form and bond more. I think because you bring more of yourself and you perhaps go to places or things are raised that aren't raised normally in normal work meetings or in communities even, and because it's in a boundary space, it's and should feel safe. It is people are able to do that. So I think it helps groups to form. I think it helps then once you've seen that actually conflict isn't always bad. I think a lot of us, like we've both said, it's difficult. Nobody particularly wants that conflict or tension. But once you get to learn as a group that you go through it together, and actually when you lean into it, positive change can happen. Then you'd realize you start to build trust in the group, and you realize you can go deeper. You can challenge each other more. Because it's not about person to person. It's just actually, yeah, I hear what you're saying, but I think this. So and then certainly when we were using it for 2 or 3 years in a team, we just became more effective, I think, as a team through that. We use it as a tool when we were getting to know each other, and we were just, yeah, and it was also, we were able as a team then to, if somebody was saying something that perhaps no one else was saying, that actually we'd trust it, and we'd be like, well, there's something there. Obviously, you're feeling it, so there's something there that we need to explore. So we'd kind of go in and out. So obviously, it doesn't mean you make the perfect decisions, and you still make mistakes, but I think it does bring about change. I think it definitely brings about change as well in removing that hierarchy from a group and just allowing a conversation to take place in a different way. And from when I've experienced it, for people who lived experience, it's not an homogenous group. So it's not saying for everyone. For some people, they might not feel safe within that, but it's a different way that does allow them to speak more as well. It allows people to come in not having to think, oh, how does this work? Or because everyone's thinking that.
Yeah, there's a level
and you're explaining it as they go. So everyone's feeling the discomfort equally. Whereas, that formal agenda kind of setting that I described before, if someone's coming in from the outside new to that, it's only them who's feeling that discomfort. So it puts them at a massive disadvantage. And, in a lot of formal meetings, there's a lot of things that are written down. And like you said before, that puts people at a disadvantage around literacy and things like that. Whereas deep democracy, it's just what's spoken and felt. So I think, and I think as well, it's important. I don't think on its own, you can bring it in, obviously, on its own and start to make decisions in a different way. But it should be really part of something wider and broader and bringing in different tools as well, whatever works, that just democratizes decision making and allows exploration of different views as well. So once you start, so I know I've not been in Spirit, there's a school in Darwin in Australia that adopted it, so for staff and for the kids. And I remember hearing about it, and it was just kids, kids are kids, obviously they have disagreements, but they were once they'd been using the tools for a while, they were like, they'd be having an argument, and then they'd be like, yeah, but that's my view, but what do you think? So they'd break it down, and they would start to use the tools to regulate themselves. So I think the potential of it is, and particularly now where, social media, where it is either got one view or another, and it's people are ratcheting up to aggression and anger and lots of, toxicity. It just allows us to have the more nuanced views, really, and just to say, actually, yeah, I feel this, but I know you might feel something different. And so I think it's got a massive potential. It's still quite new in the UK. I think somewhere like the Netherlands or South Africa or Australia, it's being used broadly across different, and Brazil, I think. But the UK, there's a few facilitators, but not many. There's a few instructors, but I think there's a lot more potential for it in lots of different settings. It could be in a corporate setting, social organizations, different and communities. I think there's a lot of potential for it. So
absolutely. And I guess just my last question really is around what you've learned from it. What's your kind of journey been with this process? What would you say you've come away with, whether that's for your practice or personally, or how's it hit you?
Yeah, it's had a big impact actually, because it's. I think some people do it and they maybe do a little bit of training and they think, well, that's enough for me actually, because when you do the training, it is experiential, and the best way to experience it is to do a process, to go through a process, and that can be exposing. And then when you do the training, you start to look at some of the theory, but it's the theory of how it applies to you. So looking at what my script is, so what is kind of what are my patterns that I've had from a childhood, and how might that play out as a facilitator. So you start, I've sort of self-awareness, self-development. It's been really, really crucial, really. And then, I mean, I've had coaching through Deep Democracy, which was amazing, revelatory, really stuff. So there's a lot of, as you're training to do it, there's a lot around personal, professional development as well. So kind of like, if you're a facilitator, being neutral and compassionate to the group, you can't really then let your own stuff in or your own biases. So you start to become aware of those things and you work on them. And so yeah, it's, and like I said before, I've used it as a parent, with the kids, not a formal process, but just kind of for allowing them to kind of have a debate with themselves, almost like on stuff. I've used it in my relationship. I use it for myself. If I've got a decision to make, I usually walk around the park, but I'll have like an internal debate with myself. So hearing other views on all the different sides, I will come to a very clear decision, and it's like I can trust the decision because I've explored it, or explored all the views. So yeah, it's had a profound impact really on me as a person, but also me professionally as well, and as a facilitator. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm loving the idea of, I think the one thing that really stood out for me out of lots of really powerful things that you've said, Paul, in this conversation, but I love that idea of the wisdom of the minority,
Mm.
and what kinds of ideas, I suppose, in a sort of equality impact assessment, we might call them mitigations. We kind of go, yeah, this group is going to be negatively impacted if we go ahead and do this, but we're going to put this in place to try and sort of balance that out. And I can imagine, by creating that space for those ideas, people might come with, as you say, modifications or, a request for resources. Okay, if we're going to go ahead with this decision, we need this to be in place in order to make that work for us, because we're going to need extra time, or, we're going to need translators, or we're going to need, whatever, we're going to need money to be able to do this, so I can really kind of, yeah, it brings together lots of things from different parts of my career, and yeah, really, really interesting.
Yeah, yeah, I'd be, yeah, obviously see, can it go into different places and what it might look like, and kind of be adapted and shift. And obviously people are using lots of different tools as well. So I love to see where different ways of working sort of merge together and form something new as well. So that's quite exciting, I think. So yeah, I do think it can be used in different settings in different ways as well.
Absolutely. And I really hope, thank you so much for coming on today and for, sharing all of this with us. And I really hope we can get the word out and sow the seed. I hope that, over time, the audience we attract here at Change Talk, lots of people from lots of different sectors, and hopefully, will have piqued their interest, Paul. Thank you so much
Well,
for your
thank you. Yeah, thanks for inviting me on. Yeah, it's been a
time.
pleasure. Yeah, thank you.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you.